Coverage with Chris Graham.
Welcome to the podcast. It's a Monday, and we're talking NASCAR and auto racing in general with Rod Mullins. And Rod, first let's start with Watkins Glen. Just this weekend's race. It was there was a lot coming out of it, so we'll have to keep ourselves busy here. First, Chase Elliott wins again at Watkins Glen and outduels Martin Truex Jr. Denny Hamlin coming in third. Talk about the win for Elliott and what this might mean for him. I know this has been 2019 has been a bit of a struggle, but once again winning at Watkins Glen, can this turn him around for 2019?
Yeah, this is one of those wins that could turn him around. As I've been hearing from a lot of people and been reading a lot of, articles today over the course of the day, this could be a pivotal playoff-changing race is what Watkins Glen was, at least setting things up for when we get through the month of August and into September when the playoffs start. Chase Elliott just dominating. I mean, I think he only gave up maybe one or two laps, a couple of laps to someone else, but other than that, dominated, won both stages of the race, and then, of course, won the final part of the race, outdueling Mark Truex there at the very end. But I'm just telling you, there were some guys that were really racing hard yesterday. Eric Jones started 14th. They raced all the way to 4th. Couldn't get any closer in the field to the top spot. You had Matt DiBenedetto, who has been traditionally one of those drivers that maybe people look at and say, well, he's one of those guys that's kind of thrown out there, and they're out there driving just for the heck of things, and they slowed the others down, or he slowed them down. DiBenedetto had a great race yesterday. He finished 5th, and it's like he said after the race, he said, I'm racing for my life right now. I'm racing for my life. I want to stay with these guys. The team that he is racing for right now, the Pro 14 that he's racing with right now, he has been begging. He wants to stay with that team, and he feels like they're making some positive moves. And he has really made some great moves up through the field through some of these races, and I think he's going to pull something off here before it's over with. And he could win a race, and he was the driver that replaced Casey Kane this year. Kane had went to that ride last year and did okay in it, but then, of course, some health issues forced Kane to kind of retire and to go out of the sport, and then Benedetto steps into this racing role with them, and he has really taken charge with that. But for Chase Elliott, this was a game changer. Everything was just right on this car for Sunday, and I'm telling you, it just one of those things that just everything fell into place. Rick Hendrick was more than just satisfied with the win. Chase Elliott's father, Bill, just could not get over how dominant Chase had been during these races. There were a couple of times there on the final 5 or 6 laps there of that race that I thought Chase Elliott was going to give the race up because, he either spun or, he either got in a little bit of trouble and Mark Truex Jr. kind of closed the gap up between 2 and 4 car lengths, and he closed it up. And then some way, somehow, Elliott came away with, pulling away and then ended up with victory. And like he did last year, Chris, he ran out of gas on his victory lap on his last burnout. He ran out of gas, and he ran out of gas last year at Watkins Glen, and Jimmy Johnson had to push him around the racetrack on the rest of the way home.
That's a good time to run out of gas. I mean, your fuel strategy is perfect in that stage if you've done that. So Kyle Busch, it wouldn't be a NASCAR race without Kyle Busch being involved in some fireworks, William Byron, Bubba Wallace. Any repercussions after the race for any of these guys for their little dust-ups yesterday?
Steve O'Donnell said today with NASCAR, no, there will not be any repercussions as he views it, at least from the standpoint of the NASCAR brass. They're saying, no harm, no foul. And I agree with that. I think it was more just road course racing. I think it was rough, but I think, sooner or later, the boys have got to grow up into men, and the men sometimes turn back into boys when they get on the racetrack. And I think Kyle Busch was just wanting to go and tell everybody, I'm going to be a force to be messed with today, but it sure didn't seem to get that message across to Bubba Wallace before it was over with. Likewise, William Byron. Byron stood in with him there. He didn't have a good run-in with William Byron, but he had an even greater unfortunate run-in with Bubba Wallace when they tried to bump each other, and Wallace bumps him out of the way, and here comes Kyle Busch and bumps him 3 or 4 times, and finally Bubba Wallace is before it's over with. He says, I'm just going to drop kick, just what I'm going to do. And he ends up drop kicking and spinning him around. And Kyle Busch was not very talkative about the whole thing, but Bubba Wallace, let's just put it this way, Chris, if you haven't read the transcript or heard the interview, he is explicit in some of his terms and the way he uses it. And I think the final word on the day was, if Kyle Busch has a problem with it, simply put, F it. That's all Bubba Wallace could say about the whole thing. He says he's tired of being, the young guy out there and then being pushed around. He says he's got a point to prove. And you really can't blame him. I mean, he's out there just the same way that Benedetto is. They're fighting for a ride. They're trying to hold on to their ride to be able to do something, and that's what Bubba Wallace was doing. The same for William Byron. They weren't going to be pushed around by Kyle Busch.
Yeah, I saw Bubba's comments too. Yeah, you can't let yourself be pushed around by anybody out there. If you do, you're not going to be very long for NASCAR. Let's talk Jimmy Johnson. His first race with the new crew chief Cliff Daniels. He finished 19th. Any improvement? 19th. Not a great finish. Now we've had. I think that we went to the playoffs system 15 years ago. We've not had a playoff without Jimmy Johnson in it. Did you see anything that makes you think he's going to work his way back into contention?
And at this point, no. Right now, with this race, I don't see anything. And the only races that are going to change any kind of factor of him maybe getting into a playoff spot, he runs well typically at Michigan, runs well at Bristol if everything goes according to plan. We'll have to see how that goes. Jimmy Johnson, some of the tracks he used to be dominant at over the course of time, he's not been as dominant here in the last couple of years. But I'd like to see him, if he does make a move, it'll have to be this coming weekend at Michigan. At the 200 lap shootout that's going to be up there in the Irish Hills of Michigan. That'll be a big race for him. But just as soon as Michigan is over with, we're coming to Bristol. He loves Bristol. He'd like to have a chance to win under the lights at Bristol for the big race there, the NRA night race that they're going to have there, the Bass Pro Shops NRA night race. If he can't win at Bristol and can't win at Michigan, his best chance of probably pulling off a race win might have to wait until Dover. And, we're getting close to that right now. You've still got a Dover in there. You still have Darlington yet before it's over. We might even see him, if he has a good chance at it, he might even pull off something if he can get to the Brickyard and be able to pull something off there. But, by the way, they were talking about this past weekend, they were talking about that compound. We're so used to talking about it at Bristol. They are thinking about using that racing compound, talking about it at the Phoenix race toward the end of the season. But, the funny thing was somebody brought it up and said, what would it be like on the surface at the Brickyard in Indianapolis? So, I don't know. We might could see it up there. It might be a surprise before it's over with, because some of those drivers have complained about traction. Jimmy Johnson has been one of them, complaining about going into the turns there at one and so forth. But will the Brickyard let them use this compound on that pristine surface? We'll have to wait and see.
Let's go ahead and talk about Michigan coming up this weekend, and we'll finish up talking NHRA. Some big news in NHRA from the weekend. Kevin Harvick, defending champion. So what are you looking for storyline-wise going into this weekend? As you mentioned, we're getting closer and closer to the cutoff point for playoffs. A lot of guys jockeying for contention there.
Well, Kevin Harvick didn't have a good race this past week. He just said, Watkins Glen is not one of his favorite tracks, but he's looking forward to going back to Michigan. And after all, he pulled off last year and so forth. I think that this week you're going to have to see some drivers make some major moves, and they could get a lot more aggressive before it's over with. Kyle Busch really has nothing to worry about right now. He's sitting at the top spot. He's holding on to where he's at. But you've got Harvick. You've also got some of the other drivers. We're talking Jimmy Johnson again, out on the outside looking in. You've got Daniel Suarez, who wants to make a shot at trying to get into this thing. Clint Boyer, who we just really didn't hear a lot of this past weekend at the race at Watkins Glen. But Clint Boyer is out to prove something. He wants to be in it. Kurt Busch wants to be in contention for something and make it into that playoff spot. You're right. We're getting down to the nitty-gritty here, and I foresee a lot of aggressive racing this coming weekend at Michigan. There'll be a lot of drafting. Of course, this is a track that is similar. And I won't say it's exactly like it, but it's similar in ways to Daytona, and they will be able to use the draft. But as always, when we get into August, we talk Michigan, we're always talking the fact of fuel mileage. And so, again, another race with fuel mileage that could play an important part in this one. How long will they last to be able to make it right down to the very end? Will we see the cautions? Will we see overtime? I think we're going to see some overtime. I don't think we'll see a race decided by a car going across the start-finish line on fumes, but I think we'll definitely see one that's going to be right down to the very end on restart and going into overtime. So this race, anybody's guess is who can pull this one off this coming weekend. I know Chase Elliott would like nothing more than to pick up a big win at Michigan if they can keep that momentum going, but he's not had as much luck or as good a luck as some of the other drivers there at Michigan over the years.
Yeah, and Chase better watch his gas strategy too, given that he was he ran out of gas on his burnouts. So now let's talk some significant news, a really nice milestone for somebody you got to sit down with just a few weeks ago in NHRA circles, John Force, over the past weekend. He had a big win. Talk about John Force and talk about that win for him.
It was great. It was great for me to even read it and get the news last night that John Force had won his 150th NHRA win. He pulled that off. I mean, here he is. He's at the top of the pack with 150 wins. He's almost the equivalent to what NASCAR's Richard Petty has been with winning 200 races. We're not even counting Kyle Busch in this whole thing, but we're counting Petty. We're also counting John Force. You know, the next closest competitor in wins with 62, if I'm not mistaken, is Ron Capps. And I've met both of these guys, had a chance to talk with both of them. But John Force, this past year, I had a chance to talk with him and his daughter Brittany in the truck at Bristol and had a chance to sit down with them. And John Force knows right now, as time is going by, he's in the kind of the twilight of his career. He's 70 years old. He's looking to go and to try to make a name, at least put that 150th win up. And he did do that yesterday out in Washington State. The thing was, he really wanted to do Bristol because he would have liked for that to have happened. Brittany had kind of dedicated that weekend race to him with the helmet using that old logo that they had when they first organized John Force Racing. They called it Team Force. But, he was tickled. He was really happy. Ron Capps was happy also. I had a chance to see Ron Capps last night on a video following the competition there in Washington. He was ecstatic. He says, hey, I would have liked to have won the race, but he said, hey, when the old man's got it, the old man's got it. He was tickled to death. But one of the great things that I talked to John Force about, we had a chance to sit down and talk for probably about 30 or 45 minutes before he had to go back to the competition. And one of the things he talks about, he says, I'm not through running yet. He says, I know. I'm in my 71 years old, but I'm not through running yet. He says, how do you accomplish that? What do you do? And he and I got into this conversation of all things talking about my dad. And my dad is 90 or will soon be 91 years old. And my dad continues to kind of just plug away at certain things. And, he's slowing down at things, but he hasn't had that in him yet to where he just wants to sit down and not do anything else. And John Force says, if I get to that point, he says, I'm going to be worthless, so I have to keep on doing what I have to do and stand up against these young guys in the sport. And it really made me feel like John Force isn't done yet. There's a lot of people who've been talking about maybe him, this being his last year. It might be, who knows. But he says he's not ready to go out yet. And yesterday he proved it. When in that 150th race, he just kept on plugging away, and he's just tickled to death over it. And you could see the excitement in his face. You could see the excitement in Brittany's face yesterday. The whole John Force racing program, you really got to give him credit and that team credit for staying with it and shooting for that goal of 150 wins.
What's most amazing about that is that you mentioned he's 70 years old. And the fact that drag racing requires such quick reaction times and that muscle quickness and that recognition quickness, and it's tough for any age. It's tough for the young folks to be able to do that. And I know he's got the veteran experience and everything else, but veteran experience can't make up for the milliseconds that you have to have that reaction time. And so that really puts in perspective. I mean, for the guy to to not just win a race. It's not like the equivalent of a golfer winning a seniors tour event. I mean, he's out there competing with the best in the sport at that age and winning, and that's an amazing accomplishment.
Yeah, it is. It certainly is. And he told me, he said at one point or another, he said, he looked at me and he said, man, I'm sore. He said, I'm sore. He says, my bones, every one of my bones ache and everything. I have just about broken every bone in my body, either with a wreck or something that's happened. But he says, it's still out there. He says, I just want it. He said, I can taste it. I want to be able to do that. And he says, yeah, I've got some of these young kids that are just beating on the door and stuff. And he says, I'm not ready to give up yet. And I told him, I said, as long as you have that desire and you can feel that in you and you can pull off a win here and there, that's worth it all right there. But, he knows it's a tough road. The kids are getting a lot more competitive. When he had to go up against Bob Hay here just a couple of weeks ago there at Bristol, and, he pulled that win off against him. I know that lets some wind down at his sails, but, he went back into it again. They went into it. Big Crew Chiefs going into a couple of those races after Bristol. He was tickled because, he says, we've got some changes, still some things up our sleeve that we're going to be able to pull out, and he certainly pulled it out of his sleeve this past weekend in Washington.
Well, we have another big NASCAR race in Michigan this weekend, and we'll have Rod back on next week to help break that down. In the meantime, Rod, thanks for your time.
Appreciate it, Chris. Thanks.